as they say. And if you're working for the weekend, well, there you go. Day. My goodness, it's the 7th of February. Can you believe it? 2025. I can hardly believe it. So, what is fascinating about this day? There's a lot going on in the world of current affairs, just as there is on the markets. Here's the thing, right? Because I often make sure to tell you when it comes to the trading stuff to ignore what you see in the news, because it's for people who are politically astute. News is also lagging information for those people, right? News is not some amazing thing that is leading information for you, right? It just isn't. Look at that. Who it is. Speaking of leading information. Hey, Zizi. Hello. Hello, little munchkin. Hello.
How are you?
Okay.
We're late.
All right. Well, enjoy.
We have pajamas.
Pajama
Awesome.
day.
You got a pajama day?
Yeah,
But it's yellow. It's yellow.
Again, the yellow.
The yellow. I like the yellow. It never gets old. I always like it.
I love.
Huh?
I love for the yellow.
So he likes yellow phones.
I know.
Why you?
Huh?
Your kids want?
My kids are already in school, yeah.
Yeah,
Like you guys are going to school now too.
Yeah.
You're carrying the big heavy pajamas?
No, she's
You can't-
wearing the pajamas.
Oh, okay. You carrying cookies?
She got crackers and
Crackers.
blankets, shoes. She brought the whole thing.
The whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
Your earmuffs are very fancy. I like them. Those are awesome. The head muffs. See you. Have a great day. There are some very adorable munchkins that I see on the way on this walk. Yeah, people often wonder. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. So news is lagging information, whether it's for trading markets or current affairs or political information. If you're politically astute, right? If you really get politics, if you understand it, you comprehend all of the game theory behind politics, realpolitik, the whole deal. Right? If you are situationally aware and strategically aware, then you really very often will see news and be like, okay, it's being said, you know, or whatever's being said or done is not a surprise, right? Whether you expected a particular move to happen or not, you're not surprised by it because you realize it was always one of the options. And from the point of view of what's happened recently with respect to the whole Trump suggesting that Gaza be emptied out of people who live there, and then it be razed to the ground and rebuilt as a luxury seaside resort. Here's the thing. Okay? We'll start at the source rather than all the derivatives that I can point to and show you how hypocritical they are. We'll start at the actual source of the people who currently live there. Keep in mind, most people who live in Gaza today are there since 1, 3, or 4 generations. And the ones who came there 1, 2, 3, or 4 generations ago, for the most part, showed up as a labor force, a migrant labor force, migrant workers. They came from Egypt. They came from Saudi Arabia, but mostly from Egypt. That's why there's a lot of al-Misris who live in Gaza, because al-Misri means the Egyptian. It's their family name because that's the name they took. And Gaza was still part of Egypt back then. And even after it wasn't, when it was part of the British Mandate, and then it was transferred, and then the Egyptians took it back, and so on and so forth. So there were a lot of people from there who came from there, right? And basically the entire periphery of all the countries that surround Israel today. People in Judea, Samaria, mostly come from Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, right? By the way, many of the people in Jordan originally came from where? Saudi Arabia, right? When the Saudis conquered the land that is now Jordan, right? So, but Gaza is full of people who originally came from Egypt. It also has people who came from who moved there from Judea and Samaria, who got to Judea and Samaria from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, all over the place, right? So basically, it's got people from about 5 to 7. Even some of them came from Iraq, as far away as Iraq. There's some people in Gaza who came from Sudan, by the way, right? You may not know this, but there are actually, African Gazans, right? Like Afro-Gazans who came from Africa some generations ago, usually in shackles, which is why there is a street named for them. It's a street whose name I can't even say on YouTube because they'll penalize the video or whatever. That's the name of the street in Gaza, right? It's literally called the N-word street in Arabic. And that's the neighborhood where black people who live in Gaza are allowed to live. When I say allowed to live, I don't mean like, casually, that used to be a thing they used to do. No, even today, if you're black and you live in Gaza, you're not free to live wherever you want in Gaza. You may not know this, they're very racist there. They're not just misogynists. They're not just racist against Jews. They're also racist against anyone who isn't an Arab, specifically. Which is ironic, since most of them, if you trace their DNA, are people who were colonized by the Arabs after their forefathers and foremothers were conquered by the Arabs. The whole Middle East, the reason that we call it, I jokingly call it the muddled East, is because there's a lot of conquering of one people over another going on all the time. It's kind of grotesque. And it's been that way for eons. But my point is, hello Japan, I see your Japanese messages. I don't speak Japanese, unfortunately, at least not well enough to read your lovely messages. I hope they're lovely. But you have to realize, the people that showed up in Gaza 100 years ago, who were not the Jews who already lived there, because yes, Jews have lived there for thousands of years. Right? We only left in 2005 unilaterally to give peace a chance. Well, that proved to be a failure 18 years later when the Hamas launched the October 7th war. It was already a failure well along the way from the time we left, but it was a devastating failure as of the war launched in October 2023. But remember, where do the Gazans that live there come from? Well, they came from all those countries I mentioned to you. And why did they go there? They went there because of money. They went there to work for the very same reasons that Arabs from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, right, or Cisjordan or Transjordan or whatever name you want to give it, Iraq, Syria, right, Lebanon, the same reason that all the people who were in those areas showed up in the Ottoman Governorate of Palestine and then British Mandate Palestine. They showed up for work. There were job opportunities here in this land for them to have. So they came here, either as farmhands, merchants, whatever, builders, doesn't matter, trades, right? Some showed up for higher title type jobs. Maybe they were muezzins, or maybe they were involved in bureaucracy in some way. What little of it there was. But most of them were the labor force, and they were migrant workers looking for economic opportunity, and they found it here in the ancestral land of the Jews. And they stayed here because working with Jews was good for business. Yes, there were Christians, yes, there were Druze, yes, there were some Muslims before those those groups of Muslims showed up here. But the Muslims that were here were far and few in between compared to the number that showed up in the late 1800s after the Zionist movement began, right? And before the state of Israel was born, reestablished in 1948. So these are not people that were here any longer than the Jewish people who came back to Israel. Like, by many of them less time, right? They were not here more than 4 or 5 generations ago. Again, not all of them. Yes, there were some Arabs already here, but not many. They were far and few in between. This was a sparsely populated, mostly deserted marshland, right? It was pretty empty, devoid of human life and civilization 100 years ago. Now it's a blossoming, blooming country with life practically everywhere you look. And yeah, there are places still in the desert that are undeveloped, which is nice. There are places up in the north that are still undeveloped, which is also nice. But it's a very developed country. Modern medicine, modern science, modern government, modern everything, right? Education. It all starts with the education, right? So this notion that for whatever reason, moving the Palestinians out of Gaza would be ethnic cleansing is ridiculous. The Arabs who showed up here between the beginning of Zionism and 1948, by and large, showed up for economic opportunity. If you invite them to leave, to go to a place where they can get a nice house, live in a peaceful country, have a good education for their kids, and you give them a big chunk of cash, they will go. They will take it. Frankly, I think a lot of people on earth would take such a deal, regardless of what country they live in. If you give somebody a nice house and a nice chunk of cash and you relocate them into a nice peaceful place that accepts them and where they can gain citizenship, or at least where they can be permanent residents and where their children can gain citizenship, or their unborn children can gain citizenship when they're born there. Right? So that we stop this whole intergenerational refugee status nonsense. If people live in a foreign country and they're accepted there and they're allowed to immigrate into that country, they should no longer be called refugees, in the sense that they should no longer be able to claim refugee benefits on a monthly basis, as the Palestinians are around the world, which is why there are tens of millions of them, even though there were only a couple 100,000 of them when this whole refugee nonsense started. Because they're allowed to pass it off intergenerationally, which is insane. And they're the only people allowed to do that on Earth. Right? By that definition, every person, practically every person, probably comes from some group of people who at one point or another were refugees. Jews could certainly claim that. We've been refugees for thousands of years. Kicked out of our ancestral homeland, sent to all the quote-unquote 4 corners of the earth, right? Sent to live all around the globe. Very few of us were left here in our ancestral homeland. But there were always some people here who were, right? Some thousands of people who were Jewish who lived in our ancestral homeland. It was never completely devoid of Jews. From the time Abraham showed up until today, there have always been some number of Jews on this land, always, because it's our homeland. And people would do anything to stay here, including hide from the Roman army in some cases, and that's how they managed to stay here. So my point is, right, that if the Palestinians are invited to leave, and if they accept, that's inviting people to leave peacefully, no force. Here, take this ticket. At the other end of this flight is a house waiting for you and a bank account with a lot of money in it. And you can send your children to the finest schools in that country, and you can have a great peaceful life. Think about it. Why would somebody who has a family in Gaza, why would they choose to not take the money and run, so to speak? Why would they not take the pot of gold and the house at the other side of the rainbow and a better future for their children? The only reason you could possibly say no to that, if you don't have some deep spiritual or historical connection to this land, which, again, the Arabs of Gaza do not have, for the most part. Yes, I know there are some. I know there are some who do. I am aware that there are some Arabs in Gaza whose families have been there for a very, very long time. But even they have only been there since their forefathers. Maybe they were there as part of the conquering, invading force under Muhammad, if they were one of the originals. Probably not. Maybe they were part of a later conquering force or a later migrant force, which is the most likely because that's actually how most of them showed up. Right? Most of them showed up as merchants and workers. That is, in fact, how most of the people living in Gaza showed up. Whether they came in the last 100 years, 125 years, whatever, 130 years, or whether they showed up in any of the centuries before. They are migrants to the land, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with being migrants to the land. I have full respect for that. I'm just saying, it's not like they were born into that land thousands and thousands of years ago indigenously, and their forefathers never showed up from anywhere. No, their forefathers migrated. Like all human beings, our forefathers migrated from somewhere. That's how it is, right? If we all started out in some tribes in Africa as, slightly evolved gigantic apes, which we are, then there's really nobody who wasn't at some point related to migrants. Civilization, so to speak. All right? First thing we did, we migrated out of the villages, or not the villages, out of the place. This is all ancient history stuff. Like, if you don't know this, you must civilizations. So again, human beings living in Gaza showed up as merchants and are probably ready to leave with a good deal. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's commendable if they do it. I'll make a separate video later about the useful idiots and how painfully obvious they're making it that it was never about the welfare of the Palestinians. It was never about that. Their support of Palestinian people, Palestinian Arab Muslims specifically, was never about giving a damn about the Palestinians. It was always about making themselves feel good, about doing some kind act of charity while being anti-Jew. And that is undeniably what it's about. And it's becoming apparent to everyone who has any kind of attention span and any kind of observational skills that, in fact, that, which is the whole purpose of the entire Support Palestinians movement, and has always been the purpose, right? It has always been about making people in the West feel good about themselves for doing something that they think was a nice Christian act to do, right? To show charity to those in need, to support those in need, being the Palestinians for some reason, even though they're part of the Arab world, and the Arab world has infinite cash with all their oil and could easily help them out, but they don't. Why do you think that is? Why is it on the Christian world to help the Arabs when the Arabs have themselves to help themselves, and they have way more than they need to help themselves? They have plenty of resources to help themselves. Why is it that they turn to the Christian world and the Jewish world to help them? Why? Right? Yes, they turn to the Christian world and the Jewish world, they attack to help them. Why do you think that is? You don't have an answer? Because I know the answer. Leave a comment down in the bottom of the video. But yeah, this move by Trump suggesting that Gazans leave Gaza and that the U.S. will take ownership of it and will lead the project to rebuild it into a luxury seaside resort is brilliant on many levels because it changes the game automatically. It already has changed the game. You can hate them all you want. This does change the game. And changing the game is frankly what the game needed more than anything. This whole non-ending war thing needed a game-changing event. Like an outright Israeli military victory, which has been achieved pretty much. Okay, yes, I know. You can say, oh, Hamas still exists. They're still in power. I agree. But kinetically, Israel has decimated the Hamas. And yes, they still have some weapons. And yes, they're not a non-existent threat. And yes, they still hold some hostages. All of that is true. But don't tell me that you think Hamas is kinetically more of a challenge to Israel today than it was a year ago, because that's ludicrous. Israel has decimated Gaza and the Hamas. Gaza because the Hamas was using it as an operational facility to conduct a war from. And they dug tunnels literally into the bedrooms of children. Terror tunnels from which to attack Israel and Israelis and Israeli soldiers. So Gaza has lost this war. They seriously miscalculated. I don't know how they could even ever think they were going to win that war, because they've lost every other war they've ever fought against Israel. Like, on numbers, just purely on numbers, they've lost every war they fought against Israel. The only wars they ever win against Israel, you could argue, are propaganda wars. That's it. And that's only because the useful idiots who believe they're crap believe them. But if you don't believe they're crap, well, they didn't win the propaganda war. They just make themselves look like monkey asses, because that's what they are. Can I say monkey ass? Anyway, dumbasses. How's that? They're liars and dumbasses. That's a technical term. You can use it in diplomacy. You'll see it works very well in international relations. Call someone a dumbass. Your Excellency, dumbass. So yeah, this isn't ethnic cleansing by any means if they are invited to leave. The U.S. does not need to force these people to leave their homes. They will run to the bus that takes them to the plane that takes them the hell out of there. They will literally drive as fast as they can to get to the airport or the boat or whatever that gets them the hell out of Gaza. No, Gazans are patriotic. They'll never leave. Really? Really? You actually believe that? Sure. So tell me, why is it that when they open the gates of Gaza, like into Egypt, which they did like twice during the war to allow few hundred medical, evacuees to leave. They had like 100,000 people show up, all claiming that they needed to get out, even though they didn't have medical reasons to get out. Why do you think that is? Because they want to stay in Gaza? No, it's because they want to leave. And you have these college students in American campuses saying, "We will never leave Gaza," and they pronounce it like as if they grew up there their whole life when they haven't been there in many years, if not ever. It's Gaza with a G, Gaza. Yeah, it's been around longer than that. In fact, it's really Aza, like the old Hebrew name, because it's been around as a piece of land, and Jews have lived there for thousands of years, thousands and thousands, longer than Islam existed. So again, it's not ethnic cleansing. It's just not ethnic cleansing. If America offers the people of Gaza a ticket, a house, and a bank account at the other end of the deal, all they got to do is give up their claim to live in Gaza and their idea and their desire to be, okay, we're out of here. We're out of here permanently. We're moving. We're no longer from here. We're going to move to a new place, and that'll be our new home. And they will welcome us and they will accept us. Great, do it. That's not ethnic cleansing. That's just literally population migration. Normal stuff. Every day. Happens all the time. And if you think that 2 million people from Gaza will choose not to do that, you think none of them are going to go willfully? I don't even know what to tell you. Oh, you think Hamas has them so scared that even if they fly around the world and live in different countries, they're all going to be living in fear from Gaza? Well, they're from Hamas. Well, they already live in fear from Hamas because Hamas rules over them with a boot in their land of Gaza, right? And what they call home at the moment. They're mistreated and oppressed by the Hamas as it is, and always have been. So why not at least go live somewhere else where the circumstances are nicer and the Hamas is not running the show? The Hamas is not in charge in other Arab countries. Right? Other Arab countries have their own armies and police forces and have their own laws. And if they welcome these people as guests and then residents and then citizens so that we can end this stupid intergenerational refugee claim BS, it's over already. It's over. So, my dear friends in Gaza, I'm sorry to tell you, you lost the war. I'm not sorry to tell you. I told you the whole time this would be your end as a game-changing event. I told you this on October 7th, 2023. I told you we wanted to live in peace next to you. I told you for decades, just like the rest of my people in Israel have said. We've said forever, we just want to live in peace with you guys. Just live in peace side by side with us. Just live in peace. You refused. You didn't want to live in peace. There's consequences to not wanting to live in peace after a while. And you've had more than a while. You've had 76 years. It's a shame you never learned. Hopefully now, when you move to another place where you will have a nice, comfortable life, and you can forget about this place, you can move on with your life and have a new chapter in your family history of being Malaysian or Indonesian Indian or Egyptian or whatever. Hopefully you'll learn to live in peace side by side with your neighbors there. And hope that they are even a bajillionth as tolerant of this kind of neighborly activity as we've been here in Israel. Because most places aren't. In fact, really nowhere is. Nobody wants the kind of trouble that you've made for us. And it's not good trouble. If it was good trouble, this would have been over a long time ago, because, in fact, the Jews were the most vocal and visible minority that stood together with those that made good trouble in the United States. And if you don't know the history about the people who made good trouble, I highly recommend you look up the civil rights movement, when African Americans, or as they were called then, blacks or other words, right, had to fight for their civil rights. It was the Jewish people in America who stood hand in hand, side by side, marching down on the very front lines of their demonstrations, arm in arm, locked arm in arm with Martin Luther King and everybody else that was right there with him, marching down in Memphis, marching down in Philadelphia, marching down all over the South and everywhere else to get their civil rights. It was the Jewish people. Let's not ever forget that. And so, on that note, I again remind you, when the Gazan population that is currently there is offered to relocate to a different country in exchange for some nice economic package, whatever that might be, an apartment, a house, a chunk of change in their bank account, it will obviously depend on the context of the individual, because some people have far more than others. There's plenty of very wealthy people in Gaza, in case you didn't know. Plenty, meaning relative to the population size. There are people in Gaza who are very wealthy. And there are people who are not. Plenty of them, more of them than obviously the other way around. But whatever they end up getting offered, it will for sure be a better deal than what they have now. And the wise ones will probably take it. And there will be some protestations, and there will be some people who demonstrably say, no, I don't want to leave. This is my homeland. This is my blah, blah, blah. In the end, the vast majority of them will take the deal because it's good for their children. And if they care about their children, little kink in the plan here. The problem is that they've sworn that they don't care really about their children. They want their children all to be martyrs. Oh, well. I guess it's neutron bomb time. Good luck. Just hope the U.S. doesn't skip offering this plan to you before you decide to take your quick road to your 72 virgins. Because if you do refuse their offer, they're not going to treat you like how Israel has treated you with its targeting. If they want to raise it to the ground, the U.S. has neutron bombs. They can wipe out the life in a very, very, very precise targeted area, like exactly the size of the Gaza Strip, without damaging any life outside that area and without damaging any of the buildings in that area. Yes, most of the buildings have been destroyed, but any of the ones that they wouldn't want to destroy that remain standing, like for archaeological reasons, the U.S. has that capability. So anybody who resists the invitation to leave peacefully and is violent good luck. You're not going to need it because it won't work. Peace, everybody.